Don Pannell for some riveting radio real estate. Morning, Don.
Good morning. I don't have a donut in my mouth.
They're delicious. All right, we are talking real estate. It's riveting radio real estate here, of course. Don Pannell from John L. Scott in Shelton. What's been going on in the markets? Hot as the weather warms up, too.
It is, yeah. This latest report that I got says that we have 1.1 months of inventory in the Shelton market, which is phenomenal. And I call up it's called the hot sheet every morning, and I have it set to show me for the last 3 days.
Yeah.
So I looked at that this morning just before I came over. There were 16 new listings, which is great, but then there were 29 pending and 16 sold. So the net gain is not there.
Not there at all.
In fact, it's going down.
Yeah.
So, and according to the report that I got from John L. Scott last month for April, we had 25 new listings, 22 pending listings, and 20 sold listings in the month of April.
Jeez.
So that leaves us with 1.1 months of inventory. So we've been talking about this for a while, that it's a great time to list your house. It's pretty much a seller's market at this point.
Yeah.
Getting multiple offers on things, which we haven't seen for a long time. Little caution on that, though, is that if you get into a bidding war, remember that you still have to appraise if you're getting a loan.
Sure.
So there is that kind of caveat. And what we're finding now is that the appraisals haven't really caught up with the multiple offers on the places.
What's that mean?
It means that the appraisal?
Yeah, if it hasn't reached the level of the bidding, how does that work?
Because the appraisers are looking at recent sales.
Okay.
So recent sales back as much as 6 months could be. So the market 6 months ago is way different than the market of today.
Sure.
So what they're going on is what they saw selling 6 months ago, which is in most cases less. Although here in Shelton, I've found that they're pretty much keeping up, but in bigger markets, there is a lag time between what something sold for 6 months ago and what it is likely to sell for now.
I heard a story the other day up in Pierce County that a house in a neighborhood, 2 years after a house sold, they were looking to re-enter that same neighborhood. 2 years.
Right.
The house values had jumped $110,000.
Right.
Wow.
Right.
2 years later.
Yeah.
Wow.
And that is actually starting to happen here. I know of a case where they bought the house for like $180,000. We're selling it for $270,000.
Oh my God.
So, that's a pretty good return on your investment. I mean, yeah. So again, real estate is still a really good place to put your money.
Yeah.
So, of those newly listed ones for last month, that it's kind of interesting that the average listing price was $231,000. The average pending price was $224,000, and the average sold price was $184,000.
Wow.
So it kind of is, it's all over the place.
It really
Totally is.
Yeah. So, but the important number is that 1.1 months of inventory. So, again, what that means is that if everything were to sell that's currently in the pipeline, and all of the potential buyers that are in the pipeline, they're thinking that it would that everything that we have available for sale would last about a month.
Wow.
And that's not very long. That's not very long.
No.
It's not.
So yeah, again, great time to put your house on the market and get the maximum number of folks. Still important, though, to price right, because you don't want to get greedy and overprice, because then if it's so obviously overpriced, people aren't even going to look at it.
No.
So you still have to price it correctly.
Right.
So that's still important.
I know we have letters to get to, but
We
of
do.
course I've got questions.
Sure.
And is there something when you're talking about list price,
Right.
psychological thresholds? I saw a house the other day in a neighborhood that was listed at $610,000.
Right.
And that seemed like an awful lot of money. But if I were to go, if the house was listed at $598 or $599, in my brain, it's not as much.
Right.
Are there these psychological thresholds that buyers will go, whoa? I'm not even. I can't. $600,000 home. That's crazy. $599. That's not too bad.
I'll buy that.
Exactly. Yes, absolutely. There are, and then on top of that too is when you're going. Most people are going online now to search, and most search engines give you a little box that you can put numbers in,
Right.
and so people will generally say, okay, show me houses between this and this.
Yeah.
And generally they go in $25,000 increments. So say you list your house for 500,000 and somebody says, okay, show me everything under 500. It will still show up. If you list it for 525,
Sure.
it won't. So you lose that portion of the market
Interesting.
that says, yeah, so you have to be aware of that. And just psychologically, as you said, $599 sounds a whole lot better than $6.
Yeah.
For some
There's
reason.
a lot of them too that are like you get $599, $950.
Right.
You know, so it's like, why not just 6?
Yeah, because psychologically,
Yeah.
$599,
It's
$950
cheaper.
sounds cheaper.
Yeah,
Yes,
cheaper.
yes,
Huh.
yes.
Very cool.
Yes, and there's a whole marketing thing
Well, it's
that
just
says
like at the grocery store.
Right.
You know,
That's true.
$2.99 or $1.88.
Right.
You know, why not 2?
yeah,
Why
right,
not
Make it easy.
right. Yeah. My background is in grocery stores, or I
Is it?
or have a background in grocery stores, and yeah, you learn all about that. You
And
know,
it's
that-
all about the .99. I'm
right.
like,
And some companies like 7s,
Yeah.
so everything ends in a 7. Some companies like 4s, so everything ends in a 4.
Walmart likes 8s, 88.
Right, right.
Everything's
88.
$1.88 at Walmart.
Right, right. Yeah.
Interesting.
So it's all psychological,
It
and
totally
there
is.
that
And
plays
it works.
It does work, and we always say that buying a house is not mathematical,
Yeah.
it's emotional.
Yeah.
So
Yes.
you're making an emotional decision. So you can't. There's no direct correlation between some mathematical formula
Right.
and an emotional response, and so the psychological thing of a lower number just plays right into that.
Yeah.
So
Huh.
yeah.
All right, let's get to our letters as we move through the alphabet. Letter
Okay,
J.
we are on J, and this is an interesting one. J stands for jumbo mortgage.
Jumbo.
Jumbo. Yes, jumbo. That is a mortgage that exceeds conforming loan limits, and it's commonly used for luxury home purchases. We don't have very many of those in Mason County.
What
we
is
have
a
a few.
luxury home? Million more? Or 3 million?
Depends on the
more?
market.
Okay.
I think here in Mason County, anything over 750,000 qualifies as a luxury listing, something like that. In Seattle, it's probably in the millions.
Yeah, oh,
but
yeah.
but the main thing about this is that if you go to your bank and you say I'm buying this $1 million house, that is going to be outside the conforming limits of most banks. So then they have to roll it over into a jumbo mortgage.
Oh, okay.
So that's basically all that means.
Okay.
So we don't have to worry about that too much here. So
That was an easy one.
that was an easy
so
one.
easy.
Yeah.
What's
So
letter K then?
letter K
Moving
is.
on to 2 letters today.
We might even get to 3 because K is an interesting one too. That stands for key rate, and that is the interest rate set by the federal government that determines the cost to borrow money. In this case, the mortgage that you pay to buy a new home.
And that's where we always hear interest rates may be going up, or
Right.
the average 30-year fixed
Right.
price is whatever these days.
Yeah, 4 point something. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So yeah, and that is set by the federal government, and that is
Oh,
the
okay.
money that they charge the bank for the right to use the money to loan out to other folks.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
most banks wouldn't go less than what the government average is, right? Because they'll be losing some money on
Right, right. Well, and I'm not sure if legally they can.
Oh.
The banking industry is regulated pretty highly. So I think they might have. I'm not a banker, so I don't really know for sure. But my sense is that they are pretty much restricted on what they can and can't
Sure.
do with that.
Yeah,
So
probably.
Okay.
yeah.
And so these are the rates that we see when they talk about the Fed and the interest rates. The
Right.
key rate.
The key rate, yeah. They don't always call it that. I think they just had to come up with something that started with K.
Sure, to fill out the alphabet.
Right, exactly.
Okay, well, interesting. That's an
Yeah,
interesting one.
yeah.
And where are these rates? What are we seeing any movement? Is the Fed getting ready to raise these things again, or is it a slow?
It's usually a
increase?
slow adjustment. My sense is that they're just slowly creeping up, but some people can remember back in the days where we were paying 16, 17%. So 4.5 sounds pretty good
Yeah.
Yeah.
compared to that. I mean, they had been as low as in the threes. It's at one point,
Yeah.
but they're starting to gradually creep back up.
Do you think we'll ever be back up in the mid-teens?
I don't know. Get out my crystal ball. I don't know. I hope not,
Yeah.
because that priced a lot of people out of the housing market because you're paying so much on interest. What we're seeing more now is folks paying off loans so that they, especially again in the Seattle market, if they're selling a house up there for $700,000, they can turn around and pay cash for something in Mason County.
Yeah.
So, and that's happening. They're you have to reinvest a lot of it so you don't take a big tax hit. So they'll come down and be able to get, 2 or 3 houses
Right.
in Mason County for that price.
Yes.
And with as commuting becomes easier and people do more telecommuting, that's becoming more and more possible for people. They can live miles away from where they work because they work from home or can work on the computer. So
Very
yeah.
nice.
Yeah, I remember so we had our Facebook memory of 6 years ago that we bought the house or something.
Right.
And I remember talking to Dale about it on the air. We were having conversations about when he in the 80s and he was buying a condo and it was
Right.
16%.
Right.
And that
Wow.
boggled my mind.
Yeah, yeah. It does add a significant amount to your payment.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and then what's really interesting when you sign closing papers, they give you this whole printout of what you're going to pay for the next 30 years, and it's like 10 pages long, and it's like, okay,
Goodness.
each month this is how much you're paying for principal and this is how much you're paying for interest. And then usually what they do, or some people do, they go down and they put a little mark on when you start breaking even.
50%
Yeah, yeah, and that's usually years down the road.
Yeah, right. Well, maybe
Right.
half, about
Right.
15 for many folks.
Right.
All right, do we have time for L? Can we get to L?
Well, because that's another different one, and that stands for loan to value, and that is a lot of times when you go into a bank to get a loan, they will figure your loan to value, and that is a risk assessment ratio that's used by lenders to calculate. And what they do is they divide the mortgage by the appraised value of the house, and then they figure how much of a percentage that is, and then they plug that into the calculations of how much income you have and what percentage the mortgage payment is going to be of your income. Different lenders have different requirements of how high you can go for that percentage. And usually what they'll do is they don't want all of your expenses, but they'll figure your major ones like the mortgage and if you have a car loan and if you have a credit card balance. And they'll add all of those things up and make sure that it's under a certain percentage, because in other words, they don't want you paying 100% of what you're bringing in each
Sure.
month for your house.
What's a good number on that? Third?
About a third is what most people look at, but then some loans, go as low as 25 and some go as high as 40. So it just depends on what your lender's requirements are.
Sure.
So, yeah, but that is a pretty important number.
Yeah, I bet.
And what they want to avoid is what we ran into a few years ago, where people were way overspending for their house, and then all of a sudden they're in a position where they can't make the payments, and then you have the market flooded with foreclosures,
Right.
because people just got into a house that they couldn't afford.
Huh.
So we want to make sure before we go through the whole process that you can afford what you're buying, and that's why we've always stressed many times on this show the importance of going to your lender first and going through this loan to value process and finding out what you're qualified for and what they would authorize you to spend of your income.
When you talk with folks, are you with the folks when they talk to the bankers during all this?
Not usually, no. I usually encourage people to do that before they even come talk to me.
Sure.
So that they have an idea. Yeah, but I just went through the process myself because I just bought a new house.
That's right.
So I did that. I went in and said, okay, this is what I want to buy. This is, can I afford this? And they said, luckily they said yes. And
That's always
yeah,
nice.
yeah. So yeah, it's I can't stress enough how important that is, because you don't want to go out and fall in love with a house and then all of a sudden find out you can't afford it.
Sure.
Yeah.
I would imagine that for 99% of the people, they're not sure what that number is.
Exactly.
They think it's either higher or lower than the actual number.
And most of them think it's higher.
Okay.
Because they kind of are looking at, okay, well, I know what I bring in each month and I know what I can afford. Well, not necessarily, because, you want to have some kind of a buffer.
Got to have a buffer.
Yeah.
Gotta eat.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Exactly right.
Exactly. And that's what they're thinking. It's
Right.
if I'm bringing home, whatever, $1,500 a month or whatever it is, you're not going to be able to spend $1,500 a month just for housing
No.
because there are other expenses.
Yes.
And
So-
there's like if you're in an apartment or something,
Right.
there's those kind of built-in. They pay for water, sewer, gas,
Right,
perhaps, but then
right.
all of a sudden you're getting your first water, sewer, gas bill.
Exactly. As a homeowner,
I
yeah.
didn't even realize.
Yeah, there are, and then there are also always incidentals that come up. So
Oh, yeah.
they've done it. I mean, it's a science of how they've come up with these numbers. So they're pretty accurate usually.
Wow.
So
That's
yeah,
great.
You mentioned science there and the computers and all that good
Yeah.
stuff. Are we past the days where you walk into your friendly neighborhood lender and they look at you or they know you from Kiwanis or something, and then they say, "Oh yeah, no, I know you're okay. We'll give you that loan." Or is it all computers now?
it still happens the first way. It's unusual, but it does. I kind of wish it happened more because I would be nice if banking were still like that. But again, getting back to all of the regulations that they are operating under, a lot of times they just can't. I mean,
There's a lot of risk involved.
there is a lot of risk involved. Yeah, and we sure don't want to get back to the days where they were just giving money to whoever,
Right.
and then again having all of those foreclosures happen. So I can kind of see it both ways. Part of me wishes that there were just the friendly old banker that you could go in and sit down with and say, give me some money because I'm a nice person.
Yeah.
But that doesn't happen as often anymore as it used to because of the regulations,
Now,
I'm sure.
is it harder to buy a foreclosure than one that's not in foreclosure?
Yeah, what's going on with those?
Sometimes, just depends on where you are, what your situation is. I mean, it usually takes a little bit longer because the bank has to approve usually the offer, and so you're going through several layers of bureaucracy that you don't necessarily have to do on a normal sale. So it can, and then the other risk that you take is you don't always get anything fixed. So you do an inspection for your own information because the bank isn't going to fix anything.
Sure.
Oh,
So
okay.
which you can kind of understand. It's,
Well,
they're
yeah.
just trying to get rid of it,
Right.
but at the best possible price because
I know.
they're probably taking a loss
Yeah.
even on. But sometimes you can get some really good deals if you're willing to put the sweat equity in to
Right.
finish the work or do the repairs yourself. You can get some pretty good deals still that way.
And what about auctions? Like they do auctions too.
Same thing. You can get some really good things, but you really have to be aware of what you're buying and the risks involved. You're not getting the
And no one's going to fix anything
nobody's
on that either.
and a lot of times in an auction you don't even get to see it.
oh, I
wow.
know.
You go in and you make the bid and then after they take the bid, then you get to go look at it.
Oh my.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
because I've seen some like places and they're like it's for auction, but they only show the outside of the house.
right,
I'm like,
exactly.
Well, what's going on inside?
That's
I
that's
wanna- I
yeah,
wanna
that's
look
kind of a red
inside.
flag when they just show the
Right?
outside.
That's what I thought.
Yeah, and then auctions too. A lot of times you're kind of on your own,
Right.
as a buyer. You don't have somebody working with you to turn in all the paperwork and stuff. You're pretty much on your own figuring it out. So, yeah,
Don, how can folks get in touch with you?
they can call me at 360-490-4493, or they can come and see me on the corner of 3rd and Railroad. They always know where I am.
All
Even
right.
if I'm not there, they know where I am.
Very cool.